Oh, okay. Okay.
Now we are ready.
Okay, great. Welcome to the January 5th, 2023 meeting of the CB6 Land Use and Waterfront Committee. My name is Sandra McKee and I am the chair of the committee. This meeting is called to order at 7:01 p.m. Tonight we are joined by District Manager Jesus Perez and Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you may have through the question and answer feature of Zoom. If there is time during the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. As a reminder, New York state law requires all community board members to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name not properly displayed, you cannot count towards quorum. Majed will be taking the minutes for tonight's meeting. Thank you, Majed. We will now take attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Majed Abdul-Samad.
Present.
Jim Collins.
I am no longer a member of this committee. I'm just attending.
The office hasn't received any such documentation, but okay. Jesus, have you received anything?
That's fine. Let's move on.
Okay. Adam Hartkey.
Present.
I just didn't want to be counted for quorum.
Molly Hollister. Okay, I don't see Molly. Sandy McKee.
Present.
Larry Shire.
Present.
Ann Seligman.
I am present. Jim, my understanding that those of us who are removed from the committee, that takes effect as of Monday. So you are probably officially still a member. And I'm really sorry for guys, like I am out tonight, but I want to be here. And I have no idea how to raise my hand on this, like doing this in this, I'm in like safe driving mode. So, but I'm not driving. So whatever, I may just jump in or whatever. So, but I'm here.
Yeah. One thing I will say, Ann, is that your camera is not on, which if you're not able to turn on your camera, we'll note that you're here. Oh, now your camera's on. Okay. So yeah, just because of the open meetings law stuff.
Actually, I am seeing myself. So it's, I feel like I can have either my phone or
anyway. So I see Ann is present. Lou Sapersky. Lou Sapersky.
Lou is here.
He's trying, he's muted, but he's trying to.
Yep. I'll count Lou as present. Sandra Sherrod.
Present.
And Letty Simon.
I'm here.
Okay. We have a quorum.
Great. We will now adopt the agenda. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and appears on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. One thing, I ask a little bit of leeway to rearrange the agenda as appropriate. I think we do have some guests who are here specifically for the casino license issue. So we may change that to being first on our agenda and then our city of yes. Are there any objections to adopting the agenda? Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The meetings from the November 28th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting these minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the November 28th meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CB6 website. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, we need to observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chats should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you're having or to state in writing information such as an email address. And that should have already been stated aloud in the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. Committee members are required by the state open meeting law to have their Zoom cameras on and your first and last names displayed during the entire meeting. If you must step away from your camera briefly, you're required to leave your camera on. Okay, and I think then the first agenda item that we will address is the casino license at the vacant property at 38th to 41st Street, east of First Avenue, better known as the Solo site. And we sent around some information regarding this. And Brendan, would you be able to pull that up for us?
Which information would you like me to pull up to
I
start?
think the article that was distributed first, and then we'll look at what was originally proposed for the site next.
Okay. There are actually two articles. I don't know which one you want me to share.
It was the first one that had the.
Was it the cranes article?
I believe so.
I don't think it was cranes. It was this. Or at least
Yes,
this is what I got.
sorry.
Okay.
This is so that if you can scroll down, this is the proposal for the site. I think, as people know, there are going to be several casino licenses issued in New York and in New York City, and right now there is a competition for them. This particular proposal is by Stefan Sloviev, and his father was Sola, who owns the site, who purchased it from Con Ed. And I think we can just stick to the rendering. I think hopefully everybody's had the opportunity to read the article. I'm not sure if any of the members of the public are interested in that detail. And then next, we can take a look at what was originally planned for the site. We currently are trying to find the full information that was submitted to CPC back at the time of the ULURP application that was approved. And we don't have that, but we certainly have some renderings of what was proposed. So Brendan, can you show that?
Yes, just give me a moment.
And I know some of the concerns that were stated are, the appropriateness for this particular part of the city. Basically, there's very poor public transportation to this part of the city. And as we know, there can be quite a bit of a bottleneck, especially at the time of the UN General Assembly. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Majid. So if anybody wants to read that article, you can access it. So this was the proposal, and just for everyone's information, the site between 39th and 40th on the west side of First Avenue has been built, and also the site down by the ferry terminal, which is between 35th and 36th, those buildings have been built as well. So we're really just left with this large open site. And this was the proposal for it. So this might you be able to zoom in on the proposed site there? The actual, yes, that one.
Is that better?
Can you go up a little bit? On my screen, it's not really showing. Okay.
Does that work?
Yes.
Great.
So this was a ULURP action. There was a lot of discussion about it previously. And because portions of the site have been built, it is grandfathered in. I did speak to George James about how this might move forward if it was a casino. application or if it was approved by the state. And he said he wouldn't assume that they would go through a ULURP, and that there were possibly two ways it could be implemented. The first would not be a ULURP action and would instead involve the state coming in with a general protection plan that describes what SOLO wants to do. GPPs, general protection plans, supersede local zoning and so do not require any zoning changes from the city. They've done this on a number of big projects such as Atlantic Yards and the current proposal for Penn Station. Because zoning does not apply, the GPP only has to follow the few land use controls in state law. For instance, the 12 FAR cap for residents in the multiple dwelling law. Since New York State needs to be involved in issuing the license, this path was one that George felt might be one they would follow. The second better way would be for the hotel and casino to comply with zoning, which would require a change in the zoning for use. Casinos are not a use listed in the zoning resolution, and they would need to be added. With a development of this size, they would also need to change the underlying zoning district or create a special district, something similar to facilitate the development. If they change zoning to govern this use, the hope would be that the city would only allow it to be by special permit, and it would be allowed where, and it would not be as of right. So it is possible for this, I think George thought it was possible in the public interest for the city to govern this use as much as possible, which means an application that the community board could comment, such as ULURP and zoning changes. So I've contacted the city planning, and they're going to, it's such an unusual thing. I think there's no process currently for how this might proceed. So we really aren't sure. They were going to do some investigation and find out for us. But do we have any comments from people on the committee? They'd like to put forth ideas about this, Letty?
I just have a question. My understanding is that this development of this site would be contingent upon them being granted a casino license. And I believe that there's only going to be one license for this in the city, and there are several competing companies that are after it. So that's all I have to say. So it's not a fait accompli that he wants to do it, but it depends on being granted that license, that casino license.
Yeah, there's
absolutely.
actually.
Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
Sorry. So there's actually a good Gothamist article that came out about this earlier this week that talked more about the process. So there's 3 licenses as a whole. It seems to be the front runners are out, Yonkers and Aqueduct, with potentially one being in the 5, within the 5 boroughs, potentially Manhattan. And then there's also supposed to be a mechanism with some sort of community input or something as well as contingent. They're saying the licenses, the application fee itself could cost upwards of $1 million, and then the actual license could cost north of $500 million.
So it's definitely not a done deal. And I guess at this point, we've heard, I believe the board has had several reactions to people feeling this is not an appropriate location for it. And I guess, Majed, please go ahead.
I was just going to add to what's said. While it's far from a done deal, I wonder if, as a committee, we just voice our concern for the GPP process, the state, even that approach in of itself in our district. But yeah, I wonder if we put forth a resolution just early on. I know we are far down the road from this.
Mm-hmm. Any comments from our committee? We could do a resolution that asks for having the process work with us. I'm not sure if we, at this point, want to say that we feel it's not appropriate in this neighborhood, or if we want to wait and see what happens. Adam?
I would be generally supportive of just a basic resolution. This is a site that sat vacant for almost 15 years. This is one of the prime parcels, here in our district and in Manhattan as a whole. And there are definitely lots better uses for this. I know there's a Ferris wheel and other sorts of things than that rendering, but, a lot of things in terms of housing and those sorts of stuff. So if we do a resolution, I think what the emphasis should be, we're on record as a board, as a committee, for the better uses. And I think that we should reemphasize that.
Majed?
Right. So in that sense, I don't know if you disagree, Sandy, but then we would say we don't necessarily think this is the best use of the site, like come out in opposition early on just for the idea of a giant Ferris wheel and a casino destination in this heavily residential neighborhood.
Larry?
I'm wondering what effect the agreement that was reached when Dan Grodnick was the councilman concerning the so-called solo site, what continuing effectiveness those promises that were made then are with respect to how this site might ultimately come to look, regardless of whether a casino is opened as a business there. One of the things which I recall was the need to connect the waterfront, the what's now the waterside pier, with the upland, and that I thought that was a key element, and it's certainly something that we as a board might in acting responsibly emphasize the need for the continuing need for and the prior commitment to do.
Larry, actually, they will, if they proceed, they will probably follow what's in the existing ULURP because it's such an extensive process to go through that once again. So it's really been decided, I believe, what more or less what the configuration of the site will be. But Sandra.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think much like what was said previously, it does seem a little premature to make a statement of whether or not we're in favor of a plan that we really haven't heard, other than what has been reported in the press, and that sometimes is hearsay at best. So I think reaffirming what we think is appropriate use of the space and that development does occur and it's not just laying fallow for years and years, I think is appropriate. So I would definitely be in favor of a statement that reaffirms what we've already said.
Great. And I think that's the point. We want development to move ahead, and we think there's better development. So can we vote on a potential resolution for that, and we'll ask someone to write it? So basically, we're asking for moving forward with the development of the site, and we state the uses that we think are appropriate for it. And we could also add that if there is a possibility that there is a casino license issued, that it follow a certain process.
And have a public comment period. Yeah.
Public comment period.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we have a vote on that, Brendan? Do you need a second?
Yeah, there. As far as I know, there hasn't been a motion or a second.
I'll move that we actually adopt a resolution in favor of what she has just stated.
And Adam?
Second that.
Great, thank you.
So when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. Majed Abdul Samad.
In favor.
Okay. Jim Collins.
And
In
Jim, you
favor.
are still a part of this committee
Yeah.
until someone tells me
I
otherwise.
wasn't aware of the date that they changed of a date per se.
Mhm.
Adam Harkey.
In favor.
Sandy McKee.
In favor.
Larry Shire.
In favor.
Ann Saldman. Yeah, I don't
And
see
it's not on right now.
Anne at the
She dropped
moment.
off.
I see Lou has his hand raised.
Because I've had difficulty
Yes, yes.
with the transmission.
Yes. But please say whether you're in favor, oppose, abstain, or abstain for cause.
Abstain, abstain for cause.
Okay. Sandro Sherrod.
I'm in favor. I think there was a question from the chair, though.
Yes, I did. Might you mind stating why you're not, why you're abstaining, Lynn?
I'm saying because I have missed the debate because I've had trouble with the audio on the computer.
Okay.
Technically, I should be just abstaining rather than for cause. So if they'll make that correction.
Great, thank you. I just want a clarification.
Okay.
Problem.
With that, the resolution passes.
Great. We'll move on then to our discussion. Oh, I'm sorry.
We need someone to write the resolution.
Oh, right, we do, don't we? Do we have a volunteer for that?
I'll take a stab as a final parting gift.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. That would be much
Let
appreciated.
me ask you this: do you wish to make mention of the effect of the general assembly with respect to having a casino there, or just not address the casino at all?
I think we don't address the casino at all at this point.
Okay.
We
That's
talk
fine.
about the more appropriate uses. Great, thank you.
All right.
Okay, next we're going to move to the City of Yes. The series of 3 zoning text amendments proposed by the Adams administration. And Majed was good enough to put together a preliminary list for us. We had some comments contributed by Anne as well. Brendan, can you put that up on the screen, please?
Yes.
And again, this is something that we'd like to do a resolution on. We may wait and collect additional comments if there are any. But this is the basis for what we'd like to present to city planning in terms of our concerns as the community of CB6. So hopefully everybody, well, let's do you want to scroll down a little bit so you start off with zoning for energy zero carbon, Brendan? Oh, that's good. Okay. And so I think that maybe Majed, do you want to sort of walk us through some of these, or would you like me to?
Sure. I can just say that the majority of the questions we had were on the zoning for energy and zero carbon, specifically about the solar panels on roofs of buildings. The questions really centered on what guidance or rules are there for the use of these? How are renters or tenants benefiting, if at all? That there seemed to be no mention of that. And then the second is just really about the shade study, light study, and the impact, and whether other alternatives have been considered. Glass with embedded PVs or other alternatives. So these are the two high level thoughts we had.
Larry, you had your hand raised.
Majed, I wanted to ask you about the relationship between having solar panels and using it as perhaps a backup system in case of a power failure, and the integration of battery storage on site for any particular building. And that also provides an opportunity to basically go off grid if there is, there's a need or even a desire not to be part of the Con Ed system.
Yeah, so to that point, actually, this was the exact question we asked George, and he specified that part of the incentive the city has. Sorry, I'm getting echo. I think somebody's mic is on.
Yes, if you don't mind muting if you're not. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so George's comment was that the city is incentivizing landlords to take advantage of this by saying you can sell back to the grid. But there's no requirement about using this as a backup. There's no mention of how tenants benefit from this. So as far as tenants are concerned, the existence of this or the absence of it is the same. And that's what I think one of our questions just outlines that thought. Have you considered at all how the impact on tenants is going to be? And maybe I can make it more concise, but word it better. But I just jotted down ideas for discussion with George.
I actually was approaching it from a slightly different angle, and that is not in terms of only selling to Con Ed, but to be independent of Con Ed.
And Majid, my understanding is that there is an allowance for backup batteries. That's part of the thing that they have considered as rooftop use as part of this proposal.
Right.
So I
but
think
without
there
a
is
requirement.
It's not. It's yeah. Sandra.
Yeah, I was going to speak a little bit to that. I think we had seen something similar in the district already, where a large development attempted to build an alternative energy source generating facility. And the intent was really to turn it into more of a profit generation scheme, right? So they can sell back to the Con Ed grid, which isn't necessarily bad when times are great. But I think to Larry's point, if we're engaging in that sort of construction, it makes a lot of sense to make that also a feature of resiliency to the district and ensure that either the building or the surrounding buildings actually can potentially reap some of the benefits in times like Sandy or other times where we've had power failures within the district in the grid, so that we're not just adding to the grid's overall power distribution, but also having a little bit more localized resiliency. I would definitely support any sort of language that helps reaffirm that.
Sandra, very well put.
Thank you.
Brendan, do you mind scrolling up a little bit? Because I think we did try to address that. Sorry. If large projects can sell energy back into the grid, that's the issue that we need to highlight there. Can you scroll up a little bit, please?
It's the second to last bullet, I think.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Scroll down. If larger projects can sell energy back into the grid, that right there. That was the wording that was in input. So if you'd like to modify that, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll be happy to send a sentence or two along that. Thank you.
Anne, you had your hand up. Anne, can you? Yeah.
Hi. Sorry, I'm not in my usual space. So, yeah, and that's basically what I was going to say. Is and I'm sorry for the sound behind me. I feel like there's so much opportunity for creativity here that it does not need to be just we can have solar and it's not just in cases like Sandy. Con Ed was asking during this cold snap around Christmas for people to reduce their energy usage, and if residential buildings had a little bit of resiliency there, that would be better. So that's
What-
that, you know, I would, the question is already there in the, you know, in my previous question.
One of the things we also wanted to take a look at was the idea of cross ventilation and how, because that is something that's governed by building form. As was noted, some of these things are controlled by the Department of Buildings and the Energy Code versus zoning. So it's actually, you know, building form that zoning can control here. Jim.
Just with respect to selling the energy back to Con Ed or whomever, I think George's presentation made clear that they could keep, that a building could keep the energy and store it for itself in batteries or sell it on to the utility. My concern with all of this is I live in a 32-story high rise. We have a lot of people that enjoy our roof during the summer, and you know, if we were required to enter into this or mandated to do so in order to maintain our energy score, I think a lot of people would be upset, and you know, a lot of our tenants who pay a premium for access to the roof pay a premium in the sense that when they buy an apartment building, it increases, but it's part of the valuation. I think, you know, they're going to be rather upset, and I would think it's a taking of property, of a property right. So I have issues with that whole notion of these solar panels on roofs either being required now or being required down the road when the city starts upgrading the energy scores for individual buildings.
And Jim, I might
That's
just
all.
note that there are lots of other ways to increase your energy score, that solar panels are not the only option. So triple glazed windows, additional insulation, all those things will raise
Oh,
your
no.
energy score. So
We have
and they're
one
not
of A
mandated.
now.
They're
We have
not
one of
mandated.
A now. We
I'm
have
sorry.
one of A now. Our energy score at the moment is A, but
So
ultimately they're going, I can see the city continuing to upgrade these. We started out, I think, with a D, as I recollect, and we made changes and we brought it up to A, but I can see them imposing additional requirements as the future proceeds.
And Jim, that's not part of this zoning. It's not, zoning doesn't require you to do this. So that's a different issue.
Not at the present time, but we all kind of know how the city is. Tends to be a slippery slope.
Were there other
Anyway, that was
comments
my
from
point.
it?
And the point that you could either sell.
Yeah,
You could either
thank
sell it
you.
or store it.
Yeah. Any other comments on this section? And certainly we can add more to this document. Sorry, Majed, I've sort of taken over. Please go back to.
Not at all. Please carry on.
So next section. Oh, and I guess one of the things we did talk about here too is that there might be a possibility to implement some of the concepts that are contained in things like the well requirements. It's one of the programs that helps guide people through sustainable building, and it is, you can achieve a well rating, but it does things like require certain distances to light in office buildings, which that then means there's less air conditioning, people could open the window. So I think we've also asked if that can't be incorporated or considered as part of this zoning as well. That it shouldn't just be solar. There are other ways that for reducing energy. Should we go on to the next section? Zoning for housing.
So for zoning for housing, really again, to high level point, the size of the units, we're wondering whether DCP has done any analysis on removing that limit or changing it, which has changed in the past. So really just analysis of the changes since they last changed and whether they're considering it as part of this round of zoning text changes. And the other is, I guess, about the conversion of buildings that originally built for commercial and then transitioned to residential, and whether there's a limit or any more guidance on the duration of time that has to pass before that conversion happens.
I will note that George did point out that we have a lot of older office buildings in our neighborhood that would probably be prime for conversion. And if there were concerns that we had, our district would be one that would be affected by that, by this particular aspect of the zoning. So right now they relax the requirements for light and air when a building is converted from office to residential. And that's considered one of the trade-offs that has to happen. And I think that last point is important to maintain those minimum light and air requirements. Adam?
Would these office conversions, would the FAR cap still count, like the statewide FAR cap? Or would these be grandfathered in?
They would, I mean, they're basically taking what's built currently and converting it. So they're not adding additional square footage.
Mm-hmm.
They're just converting the existing building. I believe that's what's happening. I'm not sure if then they could build additional area.
Yeah, I was trying to find more on the just the City of Yes website. I couldn't find anything specific, so I think that would be a question I would have regarding this.
Right. So once you convert from an office to residential, how does that affect the FAR?
Yeah, because again, I think we would want to maximize, housing, for any, purpose, so.
Any other comments that we have on this particular issue? Ajed, sorry.
So not really a comment, but there was this study done and shared in Curb that I think is relevant for folks. I see Adam shaking his head, so he probably have read it. I feel like a lot of folks did, because that was centered on a building on 38th, and that's in our district. So go ahead, Adam. I have the link. I don't know how it can.
Yeah, share it. It's a great rendering, because I mean that's the problem, is the floor plan with these mid-century buildings are too big for housing, and it shows you how they would sort of rejumble the squares.
So actually, I put the link, Brandon, if you want to just pull this up for folks to be able to see it. And this way I can put it in the chat also for the committee to be able to see it.
Thank you.
And if you scroll down just a little bit down, some of the renderings, not that great. But if you go down, there's a nice sectional analysis that shows how they're thinking about the zoning for it. Yeah, you had the right link. Yeah, right there. Yeah, exactly. So keep scrolling further. Yep, and if you go even further down, furthermore, there you go. That's one way of how they start. And this is an existing office building. And if you go further, they have a sectional rendering, which I think is really great. Explains how they're thinking about it, and how those the laxing of these regulations on air and light, how those would look like in this scenario. So not necessarily relevant to our questions. It's not going to add a new question, but I feel like this is something folks might be interested in seeing.
And Majed, for this, did they add FAR then? To
I don't
make
think
this...
they added FAR, at least not for this, but let me go back and read this. I read this a while back. It came out like a few months back.
Because yes, it is an interesting discussion, what happens to these buildings that didn't meet any of the original requirements once they start to use them for a completely different purpose? I mean, it does seem like a good idea. It's just how it gets implemented. Any other comments or things we might want to add here? We ultimately would like to write a resolution on this.
Sorry,
Oh, and go
Sam,
ahead, sir.
I'm having trouble like raising my hand, like, but I'm sorry, I'm just like not good at Zoom on my phone. But I have been really encouraging the conversion of office space to residential, for housing since before COVID. And it seems like the barriers have been open space, but one of the other or have been windows and like how we do that, which I think we've been talking about in this meeting. But one of the other issues are like certain grocery stores and those kinds of things. Kind of the services that people need. And I'm sorry, I had to duck in and out. So I don't know if those have also been included. I am so for the idea of having a conversion of office space. New York needs more housing, not more office space. Whether it's class A, B, or C. So, but I do think we also need to make sure we have the schools and the grocery stores and all the other services that you use. So, sorry for jumping in.
Michelle.
I feel like I'm not being, sorry, Majed.
No worries. I was actually just gonna. We also got a comment which I want to highlight that commercial and mixed use do have higher FAR. So that's part of the question. One of the questions we added is that if you're in an R7, do you go ahead and just build commercial and office, get way more FAR, and then convert it once you're done? That would be a loophole that we are asking whether DCP has considered it. But in our case, in our district, I mean, a lot of these office buildings have been here for so long that clearly that's not a trick they're trying to play.
Do we have any other comments, questions? I don't know if we feel we're ready to write a resolution on this, or if we'd like to wait for additional comments to come in from others. Adam?
Yeah, so what is the timeline? I know there was a press conference. What was the press conference in December, November? Has DCP given you an indication of when they plan to move forward with these outside of just, PR stuff?
No, and there've been several presentations in December. I mean, my guess is getting these in earlier gives them more time to address them. Majed?
Sandy, what kind of resolution are you thinking we put together? Because George shared there's an email address they asked us to send our questions to. I don't know if you want to add a resolution to that.
Well, we're just thinking that our board tends to speak through resolutions, and so it just seemed a way to do that, to know that these are from Community Board 6 and they're specific to our area.
Got it.
So if we were to write the resolution, we would then send that in to the location where they're taking questions. And I know, I mean, city planning is happy to address issues as we go along as well. So it's just a way to sort of formalize those questions that we do have.
Got it. Okay.
We could potentially do a resolution now, and if more issues come up. I'm not sure if we need more time to do some research on this. We've had those two really good presentations from George Janes, and I know he's submitting questions as well. So there are things that will be addressed in his questions. Brendan?
Just wanted to quickly note that I know that in our upcoming newsletter that you'll want us to solicit feedback from the public as well on
Mhm.
City of Yes. So just something to keep in mind.
Right. And that will be, I mean, I know it'll take about a month to get that, probably to get any feedback back. Adam?
I mean, maybe we just start working on the reso now and then vote on it next month. Does that work? Or
That's certainly possible. We actually have another meeting at the end of the month, so we could
oh,
then
right,
vote.
yeah, good point.
If we put this together to approve it at that, or to vote on it at that meeting, that could work quite well.
I think that might work in our favor.
Okay, great, we'll do that. So if there are no other issues on this, do we have any of the attendees who wanted to have any input on this particular issue? And Lou, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was thinking that perhaps we should lay this over to the second meeting in January to see what additional information presents itself. This is a very serious and complex matter, and I think taking a little more time might be of benefit to us.
Yes, thank you, Lou. That's what we've agreed to do. We have, I'm not sure who, Clee has raised their hand in the attendees.
I think that might be
Kaylee.
Karen Lee.
Karen Lee. Karen, did you want to make a comment? I believe you've been given the ability to speak.
Is it
Karen, are you?
permissible at this point to make a procedural motion, Madam Chair?
We're just waiting on one comment from the public, and then we're going to move forward with the rest of our agenda.
I was going to suggest laying this over by motion to the second meeting in January so that we're clear about the process.
Well, we've already agreed to do that, Lou, so I don't know that we need to vote on it. Karen, are you going to, do you want to put something in the chat? Would you prefer to? Majed? I guess you can go ahead.
Yeah, actually, Karen put a note that we can't hear her, so she's having audio issues. But I was going to say, Sandy, I can volunteer to take a stab at the resolution and share back with the committee on our second meeting this January to finalize and vote on.
At that point, we can add back any comments that we have or that come in. Karen, if you want to type your question into the chat or your comments, we can certainly take a look at those. And then we'll move on to our next agenda item. Okay, and certainly if people do have comments, you can send them into the board, and we'll try to address them in our final resolution that we do. So we'll move our agenda on to our next item, which was the we had, after our discussion of Solar One and some of the issues that came up there, we realized that there is no water access, and it's something that was discussed quite a while back in the planning stages of the ESCR project, and that we'd like to actually ask for that as an official request from this committee. And I know there'd been some discussion of, because of the ferries there, that it's not very safe, but it turns out that, there's a shallow area where the ferries cannot actually get into the cove, so it could possibly be a place where we do have water access. And we may want to broaden it, that if it's not at location of Solar One, or that we actually have water access somewhere along the ESCR. Adam?
Sorry, Sandy, this might be me being a little thick-headed. By water access, do you mean like access to the East River itself, or water
East River
access in
itself.
terms of plumbing?
No, well, both. I mean, they need both of those, but
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
they actually do have public toilets as part of Solar One.
Okay.
But no, this was actually to get to the water. There was a kayaking group that had, I guess, done a pilot program there, and that we would like to have that incorporated as part of this project. Larry.
I'm glad Sandra's here. I recall when there was the demonstration of public kayaking on the Sandy Outcrop. That was very nice, and it was done in a way that was limited in scale, and presumably, if this area is made accessible, that would be the way it would continue, and it might, for example, be tied into science education through Solar One. Sandra, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, may I add? Yeah, actually,
yes, please, Sandra.
Yeah, no, that was a. I do recall that day. There was several different events where we tried to activate the waterfront a little bit better than it had been in the past, and we had a very, very good, strong community engagement. I think a lot of people came, enjoyed it, either getting in a kayak or just really benefiting from seeing it being active once again. Because it had been not active for so long in that area. And I do recall some of the residents of the community that were a little older who might have recalled when that was more active in different ways before the Solar One development. And I do think it would be wonderful. I know the difficulty that happened shortly after that was the not-for-profit that was organizing a lot of those events was not in the same capacity to organize those sort of events from the East River and the Long Island City because of different boathouse, I guess, territorial kind of arrangements and everything that kind of changed from a political perspective in that world. But I think that was one of the uses that I would definitely strongly advocate for, trying to get people-powered craft. It doesn't have to be deep ferry boats, but just getting people actually on the water, enjoying the water and around the water more. So I think that'd be a wonderful way to reactivate that.
And at the very minimum, there would need to be a gate, which is not currently in the plans.
Well, there was also the problem where I think EDC, I don't remember if it was that particular day that you're thinking of, but EDC didn't have the key to the lock and they couldn't open the gate, and
right,
we had to climb over the railing. So
and,
yeah,
and
I think having an accessible way to the water is kind of crucial.
And that seems to be EDC's idea of going forward, that we would not be able to get down there except by climbing over.
Yeah.
So I think somehow the committee and the board needs to perhaps have a resolution with respect to providing the opportunity for safe access down to the waterfront, even if we don't specify exactly what it is at this time.
And Dina, who's here on the call, has been kind enough to put some information into the chat. And I don't know, Dina, do you want to speak to this, or I can read your answer?
Yes, I would actually.
Yeah, please.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. I was very active in organizing and running those kayaking events, which we actually held over several summer seasons with collaboration from Lower East Side Ecology Center and I can't remember the name now of the kayak group, but yes, they're based in Long Island City in Hallett's Cove, I think. But be that as it may, the issue was really that it's impossible to have regular kayaking events without, first of all, a safe place for boats to launch. And the beach doesn't really qualify for that because of the contamination. And that was one of the big issues of the whole event series, was getting permission getting EDC to give us permission to let people go down onto the beach at all. So there were a lot of forms that people had to sign. It was not an easy process. We didn't have anywhere to store any kayaking equipment or life vests or people's belongings. So really, without a boathouse and a kayak launch, I think there's some challenges inherent at the site. And now with the ferry service on the one side and the seaplane on the other, the architect who are building and designing Solar 2 said very early on in the process that they did not feel it was a safe place for a kayak launch, although I think that's debatable. We, at a certain point at the beginning of the most recent Solar 2 process, we reached out to some of the other boat houses to see about a partnership. It seemed like a partnership with another nonprofit was not really going to be feasible. I mean, honestly, I could go on and on probably for some time about the difficulties that we encountered. That said, I suspect that EDC just kind of dropped the ball on making sure that there were fences that can be unlocked along the new railing. And I think that's something that maybe we should all join together and ask them to explain how that happened and what they're prepared to do about it, because you know, the ESCR plans are probably not going to be changed at this point. They've been very resistant to anything that would require a change order or that might slow down the project in any way. Anyway, I don't want to take up everybody's time overly much, but yeah, I would be very happy to talk about this more, to work with the community board and the committee to try to figure out what the best solution is. But that's kind of how it ended up getting removed from the project, along with also, you know, budgetary concerns, in that everything has just, you know, the entire history of the Solar 2 project is that every time we get close to building it, the costs increase exponentially and we find ourselves scrambling to close budget gaps. So yeah, that's kind of the Solar 1 position overall.
Thank you. And Sandra.
Yeah,
Sorry, Sandra.
I think, yeah, real quickly, I think Dina hit a lot of the points very eloquently that we had been running into. I know when we were having a lot of discussions around the Eastside Coastal Resiliency effort, there was several of us who attended regular meetings, and I know many times I had heard the idea of having a facility, whether it's a container based or otherwise, to store kayaks on site so they don't have to be brought over from the Long Island City Community Boathouse or other facilities, would help facilitate the actual use, because it required people to paddle a series or like a flotilla of boats across the river, which has a strong current, is also a lot more congested in traffic than just that little cove. So yeah, there were lots of impediments to it being very successful back then. It was kind of a pilot, but I think it's not completely out of the question of making it work. It's just there needs to be some thought and engineering and effort. But and I wanted to just say, I think we actually had a resolution or two that actually stated how we thought this could work and the importance of it. So maybe it's time to dust it off and kind of see where, if anything has changed.
Yes, and if it's not, I mean, I think we feel that it's great because Solar 1 can contribute and help and support, but doesn't have to be there. And we actually have all that space under the FDR, where all they'd have to do is take a couple parking spaces to put a someplace to store the kayaks. So
yeah, although I feel I have to point out that now that the wall is there, it's much more difficult to get things in and out of the park. But it could be possible, I think, to put some kind of container at 20th Street. Now, of course, I also feel like I should mention that there are also the longboat people who you may remember a year or so ago were really pushing to be able to launch longboats from the cove. And I'm sure, they will always be anxious to try to restart that conversation, even though EDC at the time shut it down. But I think that had a lot to do with the timing. It was just as the ESCR was getting going and everything was about to be under construction. And maybe that's, another solution. If they can install something like this hoist thing that gets things in and out of the water, maybe we could build on that and find a way to create more direct water access.
But it does sound like it's something, as Sandra said, that we should dust off what we've done before and reiterate that, we have this great facility. We really need to have water access. Larry, you had a comment?
Yes, I think the facility is called a davit for lowering
The crane,
boats.
yes, it's a davit,
Right.
that's correct.
Right, that lowers boats straight down into the water.
They use those to lower people to wash windows as well on buildings. It's a general. It's a
We don't have
general.
any windows
term.
down there.
And on ships, you lower the lifeboats.
Yeah. So, but let's again. I don't want to. I think we're all. If we could agree that we will revamp a resolution to address this, maybe we again in our next meeting. See what we've done previously. We've got our great Airtable resolution tracker, pull it out and put together something that asks again for this type of access to the water.
Right. And I wanted to ask Dina, what Solar One in terms of education opportunities thinks of having a means of getting down to the beach. You can obviously wear boots, rubber boots if you're going down into the sandy area.
Yeah, I'm not sure about basically, as far as the beach is concerned, the beach is out of our jurisdiction. It really is entirely up to EDC. If anything is going to happen to the beach, they've expressly told us not to let people onto the beach because of the contamination and the liability issues. And, in the past, I often had dancers and filmmakers and other kinds of artists, photographers. Everybody loves that beach. It is beautiful and unique along, the East Side waterfront. But yeah, I've been told in no uncertain terms that we're not to let people onto the beach. So really, this is a question for them. But as far as, the educational opportunities of water access, we have talked to New York City Ferry about potentially using the gangway to the ferry launch. The fact is, over the last couple of years, we haven't been having educational programs in the park because of COVID. Now that the park is supposed to reopen, we're preparing to start bringing students back into the park this spring, and certainly doing water quality testing with them again. And personally, I think it would be great to be able to find a way to get students more connected to the water and the waterfront. And if we can find a way, to do that safely and in a way that satisfies EDC's legal department, then I think that's definitely something that we're going to pursue.
So we should address contamination in the reso that we want that.
That would be great. Yes.
Yeah, taken care of. Taken care of.
Yeah.
So do we have someone who would volunteer to put together some of those issues in a new resolution, looking up what we've got already? I guess.
Yes.
Larry, you happen to be right below me in my grid here. So if Larry, that would be great. And we can
we need to look at what we've done
in the past
previously, and Dina, if you can be in touch with me, I would like to incorporate some of Solar One's education related asks, because that really is at the thrust of making your new facility as useful as it possibly can. And if EDC can be persuaded to make the river, which you border, more accessible for educational purposes, even if people aren't swimming per se, to understand this pollution, it would go a long way to maybe coming up with solutions to it.
I would be delighted to provide stuff, and I will also have a conversation with the education team and see if this, the fact that you guys are really in support of this, if that sparks any new ideas about things that we could contribute to, really maximize the space. I mean, I do think the water is much cleaner. Probably most of the bad pollution is on the bottom, but then again, it is very shallow at the north end of the site. Maybe people could actually, it would be great if students could actually get soil samples and find out what was in the sludge at the bottom of the river.
Yeah, that would be fascinating.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to lay this over to maybe have a resolution next month for our consideration. Since we don't have the details, I can't really propose the actual resolution yet.
Great. I think we're all agreed. Do we need to vote on that? We're show of
Second the
hands,
motion.
everybody. Show of hands of everyone who thinks we should go ahead with this at the next meeting. Okay. I think we're set. We will do this at the next meeting. And Tina, do you have an update on schedule when the park is going to be open?
I don't. We are assuming that it's going to be at the end of this month, that the park will have a sort of soft opening since it'll be January, and that we're going to have some kind of opening event in the spring, possibly on Saturday, April 1st. But it's not quite decided yet, but I will certainly let you all know.
That's great. We look forward to having you back again.
Yes, thank you. We're so excited about getting back to the park.
Great.
And letting other people back in the park.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And so that's actually the end of our agenda for this evening. Chair's report. I actually don't have anything to report other than, as you heard earlier, there will be some changes to our committee. I'm not sure exactly. Kyle, you're here. Do you want to address that or?
No, as I mentioned at the full board back in December, we're going to do some committee reassignments to make sure that we're getting fresh perspectives on the board and on different committees and including new voices. So I'm very excited for it and excited for the new committees that people will be on. So it'll be exciting.
Great, thank you. And any old or new business?
Move to adjourn.
Oh, sorry, Larry. Okay, just about, Lou. You almost made it. Larry?
I have a question. Maybe Dina has heard because she's been somewhat plugged into what's happening in the ESCR project. But does anybody know when construction is going to begin on the groundwater retention facility? The chamber at 20th Street and Avenue C?
The contract's been let already, and I think in the latest information that they put out, there's some timeline, but it's definitely moving forward. That aspect, I think that was the last part of the of contracting that was to be determined, and my understanding is that it's going ahead. They may not know the full details of that particular portion of it yet.
Thank you.
Okay, Lou.
Move to adjourn.
To adjourn or second, whichever is appropriate.
Okay, and thank you all. We'll see each other again at the end of the month.
Happy New Year, everyone.